Hi everyone, welcome back to Ethics TV. And in episode 42 here, I'm joined by Cary Sparrow. And Cary, as I always ask guests, what is exciting, motivating, and keeping you busy in your life right now?
Hey, Jonathan, thanks for having me today. It's a pleasure to be talking with you. That's a great question. You know, all the turbulence in the economy actually, while it can be creating a lot of stress for a lot of people, actually creates lots of opportunity for me and my team at Wagescape. We're in the business of bringing clarity to what's happening in the labor market globally. And the more uncertainty that there is for lots of different reasons, the more people are reaching out to us to bring some certainty into their own operations and decision-making process. And so we're busy. We're really busy. We're busy with people who want to use our data products. We're busy with technology and service partners that want to build our market intelligence into what they bring to market. And we're busy with folks who want to hear about it. And so, you know, the summer is a lot of times can be a little bit slow as folks are, building in more time for their vacations and so forth, but we're not seeing it.
Oh, well, that's good. Well, busy is good. I'm fascinated by your journey of how you went from US Navy officer on several nuclear submarines, 35 years in engineering, military consulting, technology operations, and then being the chief executive of Wagescape. So, well, I think if we go from the journey to how you got to where you are and then into how Wagescape operates, how did you go from the start to now in the 3.5 decades progression? What was that route? Because it doesn't make logical sense from an outside naive observer as you go from there to labor market trends, HR professionals, consulting firms. I don't get the link. You have to help me with that.
Yeah, so it wasn't planned. Let's put it that way. But I've reflected on it. I've had folks like you ask me that question, and I found a few themes that have kind of guided that journey. I mean, one of them is just to recognize that I am kind of a dyed-in-the-wool geek. I like technical things. I like, things that are kind of complicated or interesting to understand. I like building things, so I'm kind of an engineer at heart. And so I got an engineering degree. The U.S. Navy was kind enough to pay for that degree and to give me a job for 8 years after I got out. And I like kind of doing cool things. I like working with smart and interesting people. And the submarine force is full of those kinds of folks, and you're doing really interesting things. And it's, being on fast attack submarines, especially I was in during kind of the late stages of the Cold War. And you do really cool things on submarines. And it's a very fast tempo environment. You come into work one day and find out you're, leaving for places unknown, within 48 hours. And I like that. I really thrived in that kind of environment. So technical, geeky, great people, and an interesting kind of operations tempo. When I left the Navy, I interviewed with lots of different places, lots of different engineering jobs and stuff, but the one that seemed like it was going to be the most interesting and have the most interesting people was a management consulting opportunity that I had. And so I joined a firm, in a role as a management consultant, and I didn't know anything about management consulting when I did it, but I picked it up along the way. I got an MBA along the way. I got to work with literally a couple hundred companies over the course of, I was there for 14 years. I joined as a junior associate. I left as a global managing partner. So I really, that environment really suited me well. Doing really cool stuff. I was doing stuff that most executives get to do in their careers maybe once or twice. And I was doing it all the time. Mergers, acquisitions, spinoffs, major programmatic changes, big growth expansions, big reorganizations, things like that. And the one drawback, though, was I was on the road all the time. By the time I left consulting, a typical week for me involved 3 different cities besides my hometown, and that really wears you out. And I was ready for a change more from a personal standpoint. I wasn't looking for a change, but I was definitely ready for it. I wasn't out looking for jobs because I had worked with enough companies to know that the grass really isn't much greener, if at all, in other places. But I got an opportunity with a company here in Minneapolis where I live, called Cargill, which is an amazing company and big, global, fascinating company, amazing people, doing really interesting things. And they wanted me to come in and do for them, with them, as part of them, what I was doing in consulting. And so I was happy to take that opportunity. And I was at Cargill almost 8 years.
Wow.
And doing kind of big global changes on the corporate side. That move actually worked out really well for a variety of reasons. Within 6 months after, I was basically as a consultant on the road all the time. I had an apartment in downtown Minneapolis that I only saw like 2 days a week. Didn't have many friends. Within 6 months, I had a house in a, very, in a part of town that's really great. It's by the lakes and trails and everything else. I was loving it. And within 4 months after that, I had a dog. Within a year, I had met the woman that I would go on to marry. In a couple of years, I had a son. And so my intention around improving my personal situation and bringing, I guess, a more full life to bear actually worked out really well. And meanwhile, I was occasionally traveling and getting to go all kinds of places all over the world. Cargill's in almost 70 countries, and so I got to visit a ton of really interesting places. And along the way, was always kind of picking up insights in terms of where there are opportunities to do things better. One of the things I was responsible for at Cargill is about rationalizing all the workforce data globally, which is no small task. We had a whole team working on that, and but we made progress on it, and we figured out how to do a lot of things that, as I looked at it, I was like, wow, if other companies could do this, this would be great, because instead of seeing a labor market that represented 70 countries and 70 companies worldwide through one common lens, which is basically what we built. Imagine what the world would be like if we could do that, across all companies and all countries. And because basically data about the labor market is awful. Anyone who works closely with it will tell you that it's awful. And all you have to do is go out and look and say, what jobs are out there? Who's hiring? What skills do they want? How much are they going to pay? It's better now than it was, but 10 years ago when I started, it was truly horrible. And today it's not that much better. They've replaced, the quantity with noise, right? They brought in quantity and created a whole bunch of noise now. So it's not very useful. In the labor market, along the way, I've always had kind of a part of me, which is more of a service orientation. And the labor market touches everybody's lives in the entire world. Every individual, cares about their occupations, regardless of where you sit. Every family, every community, every company, every government worldwide, all depend on what's going on in the labor market. And anytime you have a market that is that big and the information about it's really bad, it's really inefficient. Inefficiency in this case means people aren't able to thrive with the opportunities that are going to suit them the best. Companies can't find the talent. They can't balance the investments that they make in that talent. The world can't develop in the way that gives people the most opportunities. There's huge innovations that are being missed out because people don't see those opportunities. There's a whole layer of extra costs that companies and individuals are bearing because information is so bad, and they have to come up with all kinds of workarounds, because of that. Or mostly they just miss out because they don't have the information they need. Serving and consulting, your primary focus is about the success of your clients, and your own success is derivative of that. And so, I just am, pretty attuned. Even in the military, the service to the country is one thing, but really, as an officer in the military, your primary service is to the people that work for you, the people under your command. And so it's very ingrained. And so I just, am pretty highly attuned to what matters in people's lives. And I'm also a geek, right? So the way that I kind of manifest, that sentiment in what I do is I like to build things, and I like to see new solutions. And so that brought me all the way back home. I had an opportunity to start a company that was not a consulting company. It was a big data, high tech, hardcore technology company rooted in economics and solving economic problems, and I took it. And that's, you know, that's how I got to do what I do today. And
That's
so
cool.
you said, how do you connect the dots between, and like there was no plan. There was no plan. I just look for the things that, like I said, I'm a geek, so I like geeky things. I love working with really interesting people, and I've done that at every step. And I like being able to make a difference fairly quickly. I like kind of a higher tempo of things. And anyone who's worked in a startup or a small business knows that you move fast.
Yeah. In the Greek times, people were buried with a kind of a headstone which didn't say their name; it said what they did, like as in their purpose. And this is the kind of the Greek structure of what's called teleology, which is the study of purpose. And what if you were to be buried with a headstone that said what your purpose in life was? Looking back, what would you say, or another kind of an easier way sometimes to frame that is if there was an obituary written about you now, what would it say that you were actually about?
So that nobody's ever asked me that question, first of all, and secondly, just listening to it, it's a very humbling question. And if I were to answer it 10 years ago, it would be totally different. Now, I think I'd be happy with, he tried to be a great dad and he tried his best to be a good husband. That's the older I get, the simpler my expectations have become.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, isn't it? So I'm, approaching my mid-50s. I feel that things are becoming simpler to describe in terms of motivation. Like, for instance, my view about my kids. I've got 2 grown-up kids, and they hate the fact I call them kids. They're like, we're adults. I mean, they're in their mid-20s, so it's like I can't really but anyway, my ambition for them used to be, I want them to get the right exams so that they go to the right colleges, they can get the right jobs and whatever. Now my ambition for them is so that they are happy. I just want them to be happy. And it's simplified as time, like with my parents, who are fortunately still alive, my ambition for them is for them to be healthy.
Yeah.
And whereas, 15 years ago or 20 years ago, my ambition for them was to get off my case and I know what I'm doing. And, and now I just want them to stay alive in a healthy way. So things become more easier to describe. Yep. And so when you're in Wagescape, as you do what you're doing in the number crunching and the provision of services and resources, is it front of mind that what you're doing is exposing information that makes people's lives easier? Or is that a kind of a derivative impact?
Well, that's an overall purpose, right? It's kind of like a mission statement. It manifests itself in what we do collectively, like the sum of all the little bits and pieces of everything we do every day. What we do on any given day, can you draw a line between that, any little task and making an individual's life better? Maybe not. But collectively, that's the arc that we're pursuing is, bringing about a place where people can make better decisions about the life, the professional life that they want to build, and companies can make better decisions about how they can allow their workforce to thrive and how they can, get the workforce they need in order to be as successful as they want. Governments, and communities can make the decisions around how to develop their, workforce environment in order to, meet the needs of their, citizens and residents. So,
if you were to live again, would you change, or this infers regret, which is not what I mean to do, but do you feel that the name Wagescape covers what it is that you're doing adequately? If you were to, upon reflection, I was speaking to the guy from Snarky Puppy, brilliant funk jazz fusion band, and when he created the name Snarky Puppy, it was a college kind of joke project, and it wasn't meant to become a global funk jazz fusion phenomenon called Snarky Puppy. It was like, that's not, if I knew that it was going to be where it became, I wouldn't have obviously called it Snarky Puppy. I'm wondering whether sometimes we kind of in retrospect look back and think, is there a name that would be more inclusive of what we're doing? Do you find that with Wagescape, or is it still bang on what it is that it's doing?
Well, the market for intelligence about what's going on in the job market has evolved really dramatically in the last 10 years. We didn't start off with the name Wagescape. We took on we had a very geeky name that referenced, is a very geeky name that sounded cool, but nobody got why.
Can you tell me what that is? I want to know now.
Yeah, so we started off as Greenwich.hr, and Greenwich, like Greenwich, England.
Yeah.
And there's a very geeky backstory to that that nobody got and nobody cared about. I thought it was really cool. I've been to the Royal Observatory in Greenwich.
Me too. And I
hired. I sat, both, one foot on either side of the prime meridian, and
me too. I mean, I get it immediately. Anyone who uses, it's the same as saying anything Turing. Like, you can say Turing, you can say, Milton Keynes, you can say Babbage, you can say there's words that you can say that for geeks, it's like, I get you, man. I hear you. Greenwich makes complete sense, but no one else got it. Okay, cool.
Nobody else got it. And right after the pandemic, when wage inflation, went completely out of bounds, and it drove inflation overall out of bounds. And one of the things we're especially good at is figuring out we're uniquely good at figuring out what companies expect to pay for the jobs that they're hiring for. And we were really leaning into that capability, and we introduced a product that we were calling Wagescape, and it blended, the lines between Wagescape and the rest of what we do were getting blurrier. And so we just extended the brand and shifted the brand of the company to Wagescape. Now, going forward, are we going to stay anchored in Wagescape? For certain communities that we serve, yes, absolutely. You invest a lot in a brand. But for other communities we serve, something that is a little bit more broad and flexible gives us a bigger playing field to work with from a brand standpoint. I could envision us going there.
I can too. Yeah, it's interesting. And so let's talk about the modern technology landscape in the labor market. So obviously we have the double-edged sword of artificial intelligence and robotics of big opportunity, new jobs that we didn't even know about. Also maybe an opportunity of getting rid of the tasks that no human really wants to do if they had a choice. And on the other side, there is the removal of tasks and jobs that has an impact. I also want to ask you on the blockchain side of things, what the impact of digital currencies will be from a payments perspective. Where would you like to start on that tech landscape?
So I'm a lot more familiar with what the AI implications are. Blockchain and digital currency. I'm kind of an amateur when it comes to looking at that. We don't play in that space. And so my opinion is worth exactly what everybody else's opinion is worth on that one.
Fair. So let's talk about AI.
Might be a little bit more then. So
okay. AI and robotics. Tell me, when people say to you, "Oh, the impact on the labor market is going to have to be negative," what's your view?
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
Absolutely not. I mean, we're a small business and we're able to do things that large companies weren't able to do. So, I have a marketing department. It's a large language model now that generates a lot of our recruiting content. If I want to hire somebody, same thing. I don't, I tell people, I input the basics of a job and I get a very well articulated, job description. With agentic AI, it won't stop there. It'll, figure out where to place that description and how best to attract candidates. And then it'll manage that whole administration process. And that's real. That's as of today. And that wasn't even envisioned broadly 12 months ago. There were, the people who were on the forefront of AI were envisioning those kinds of things. But in terms of kind of the community writ large and really the change makers of the world, the abilities of agentic AI were not envisioned a year ago in any kind of meaningful way. And a year before that, the abilities of the different models that are available now, AI models, were not really envisioned or appreciated. And so I don't see AI so much replacing jobs. There will absolutely be some of that. So I don't want to minimize that, but the capabilities that are brought to bear open up so many avenues for doing new things, so many avenues for being even more productive, so many avenues for being, even having broader reach in whatever role that you have and having new innovations. It's going to change work. And so for people who really don't like personal change, it's going to be and is very traumatic. There's no question about it. And
yeah,
like if you're in marketing and you're a copywriter, and you've been doing it for a while, and the way that you're recognized is by the quality of what you write and the amount of time that you put into it, and so forth. AI allows you to streamline things down so that what was taking up 90% of your time now takes up 1% of your time, and the other 10% of your time, which is where you're really putting your own kind of personal imprimatur on your work, is going to be even more important. And then there's new kind of innovations that have to come into play in terms of, well, how do you define what you do going forward? And that's really, exciting to some people and frankly scary to other people. But it doesn't mean that the work and the role is necessarily going away. And in the meantime, the transition is so messy. Anything that, because AI will tell you with authority the answer to almost any question that you present it. And it's now up to you, the user, to figure out whether that answer is worth anything or not. And it's spoken with authority and with examples to back it up. So it's almost, on some things that are easy, like, a year ago, we were taking vacation in San Diego, and I asked one of the models to develop a 5-day family itinerary with 3 events each day in San Diego, because we hadn't been there before. And, it gave me something that looked pretty good. I gave it a couple of modifications. Within 10 minutes, I had something that really worked. And so for that kind of application, it's really good. But then I'll tell you, you go out right now and you ask the 3 biggest models, what is the pay for I'll just say a back-end developer, somebody who, an IT developer right now, and you will get 3 wildly different answers. And when you look at where the sources are that they're referencing, you realize that they're using data that does not answer your question at all. At all.
Yeah.
And so there's, a really messy transition that's going on. And at the same time, the AI capabilities are growing faster than people can keep up. We started almost 2 years ago, we started a project where we have a massive, massive data platform. And we thought these LLMs that are now available, where you can just basically say what you want, would be perfect to put on top of our data and answer the kind of question like what I just said, right? With actual real data underneath it. And we shelved that project after 3 months because within 3 months, the underlying technology had become obsolete 3 times. So we basically start over again. And so we just shelved the project and said, let's let things settle out. And so the pace of AI development is moving faster than anybody has ever experienced before. There's no planning process that has existed in the past that can accommodate the pace of change with the AI capabilities right now. And that's kind of scary, if you ask me. So, you've got most companies that are medium-sized and above work off of annual budget cycles. And when you've got, so you're not talking about product life cycles now that are 2 years, like, the typical Moore's law for technology, doubling capacity every 2 years. You're talking about a corollary to that that's basically about every 4 months. If I were to guess, there are others that may have a different opinion on it, may come up with a different number, but it's that degree of change. Nobody's got a planning process that allows for that. And at the same time, you've got adoption. Like, let's talk about talent. Recruiting teams now are flooded with more applications. I mean, it was bad before where they had a ton of applications for every job. Now it's, an order of magnitude worse. And all the applications and all the resumes are being written by AI. And so you really have to look closely to see, to discern what's the differences across them. And there's just a ton of noise injected into the system now because you have a really efficient way to get communications, out. So there's a lot of turbulence that we're going to have to deal with. and that turbulence is going to be, from everything: labor market, work, society, governance, everything. And there's real benefits, and there's not just inconveniences like I've been talking about, but there's real risks too. How much control do you want to turn over to AI, and how, agentic AI, what constraints do you want to put around that in terms of what it can do? So hard opportunities in front of us, I think.
It's true. And so, and where do you see I mean, it's a almost impossible question, I guess, but where do you see Wagescape's future in that landscape? Because you're progressing anyway in the way that you are doing, but what does it look like in the future? What's the next 3, 5, 7, 10 years of Wagescape?
So our bet is, I mean, and I've got a background in AI. Actually, I started building AI models when I was in grad school back in the 90s. We didn't call it AI though. Called it machine learning and
yes,
neural networks. But they all need data. They all need data to train on, data to reference. Our bet is that by being a source of high quality, well-respected data about the labor market, we're in a better position to serve the needs of organizations that are building the tools and services driven by AI. And so that's our bet, and that's where we're getting a lot of traction. But like I said, it's changing so fast. Who knows where things? I mean, it's impossible to predict. What capabilities are going to be, available by AI, even a year from now. So we'll see. It's going to be an interesting ride.